Please welcome to the stage Dr. Leanne Howard, Senior Principal for National Security at MITRE.
Welcome back. To our in-person and virtual attendees, thank you for staying engaged. Our entire morning lineup emphasized speed, scale, flexibility, and doing all of that while reducing complexity. Undersecretary Duffy stressed that, that time is the most critical and unrecoverable resource. We also heard a lot on leadership setting culture, including how to take good risk. General White and Admiral Carell demonstrated the fundamental close partnership and that growing partnership between acquisition and operational leaders. They also talked about making changes real through lean, aligned processes and organizations, reducing that bureaucracy in the middle. This trajectory continues to take shape. And as General White said, when teams start getting comfortable, we'll move that cheese forward once more. So let's turn to the afternoon. Mr. James Ruocco, Assistant Secretary of War for Acquisition, has been a key architect in the department's transformation to rapidly get acquisition on a wartime footing over these last 18 months. This ethos, drive, and dedication to accelerating critical capabilities to warfighters has been central to his decades with the Department of War, from Chief Engineer for the F-35 Program Office to leading technical baseline reviews to his senior executive service in weapon portfolio management, including with Naval Air Systems, Joint Air Capabilities, and most recently as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of War for Strategic, Space, and Intelligence Portfolio Management. He's covered a lot of ground. Assistant Secretary Ruocco exemplifies breaking barriers and has led us beyond barriers now to ensure our military has the most lethal and the most integrated capabilities needed, ensuring that warfighting edge. It is my pleasure to welcome him to the stage.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. That was great. Good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to be here. So you heard some themes this morning, and I'm going to continue those themes, but I'm going to try to dial it in a little bit more, practical application, talk about some things from my experience as well as my expectations. But first, let me say to the distinguished leaders and national security professionals in the room here, as well as online, representing our military, international partners, government civilians, and the industry who develop, build, operate, and sustain our arsenal. Thank you. Thank you for your service to the nation and to the strength of our alliances. My thanks to MITRE for hosting this impactful event that brings together from across the acquisition ecosystem those who are ensuring the capabilities will be there when the warfighter needs it. Each of them brings a critical perspective to this and getting after the challenges and the opportunities ahead. And together their voices are going to underscore the urgency and unity required to drive acquisition transformation at scale. I'm going to give my perspective on the department's acquisition transformation strategy. My fingerprints are all over this thing. And I'll talk a little bit about how I went about shaping it. And then we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. Before I get into it, just a little bit about me beyond that intro. So I've spent a lot of time in a lot of different areas of this business. This is not an academic exercise for me. It's not a bureaucratic one. I'm not looking to tweak around the edges. I used more of a root cause corrective action approach. I'm a system engineer, so I think like that. What is actually slowing us down? What is making everything so hard? You can't just say bureaucracy and wave a wand like, I'll just end bureaucracy. We had to go layers deeper than that. So I bring that 30 plus years of experience that I have in the trenches to the game here. I have a pretty good sense of what's working and not working and why. You heard a little bit about my career path. I've done lots of different functional assignments in lots of different areas across service and joint offices. And so with that breadth of experience, I bring that into this job. It's with me every day. It's all I think about, all that time I spent out on the pointy end with the warfighter, the time I've spent with my industry counterparts getting hard things accomplished. I bring all that to this job, It's more of a practitioner's approach, and that's what you're going to hear a little bit of. So we're approaching this in a completely different way, I'd say. I don't know about all you guys. This is my fourth time with a major acquisition reform effort. People often ask me what's different this time, and you heard this, I think, General White, I said it first, by the way, but I think he said the same thing. I think it's pretty clear why it's different. We have a leadership that is willing to challenge everything and push all the boundaries, and we have the top cover to do it. And then we have unity of effort across industry, Congress, the administration, Department of War. I've never seen so much unity of effort on this. So I think we're actually going to deliver on these things. There is a lot of energy to follow through on it, and you're going to see a difference this time around. It's really a once-in-a-generation opportunity to fundamentally change how we develop, produce, deliver, and maintain capability. Stakes can't be higher. The world is increasingly fluid. Since the NDS came out, we're already in an active combat situation in the Middle East. It's a reminder that our strategic environment is constantly shifting. The ecosystem, again, Department of War, Congress, industry, has to understand we're on a wartime footing. This is that sense of urgency that's going to drive a difference at this time around as well. 30 years of atrophy can easily lead to that. We're trying to recover from 30 years of not getting after all the right things. So that margin for bureaucratic delay has collapsed. Speed is not a preference. Speed is survival. Speed and urgency is absolutely essential to correct for that 30 years of atrophy. Every delay is a decision we can't afford. Every decision must now bend toward speed of delivery and capacity to enable our warfighters who do not have the luxury of our timelines. We can't tolerate years of debates and analysis of alternatives and all other kinds of studies, budget hesitation. Our adversary is not slowed by our processes and our risk-adverse decision cycles and behaviors. The old way of doing things puts our warfighters at risk. Future conflicts are going to be defined by contested logistics, rapid attrition, and the relentless need to reconstitute combat power faster than our enemies can degrade it. The side that can adapt, produce, and deliver at speed will hold decisive advantage. That side wins, and that's why the partnership matters. Across industry, traditional and non-traditional players, OSW, Joint Staff Services, and the Congress. The operational demands are clear, and they depend on our acquisition outcomes. None of these vital programs can be viewed as a one-off. The only way that they're successful is if the acquisition ecosystem is aligned to make them successful. That means requirements, acquisition, resourcing, a holistic look at how we're doing this, not just the acquisition system set of processes. Anything less is not acceptable. How many have read the Acquisition Transformation Strategy? Just show of hands. Okay, if you haven't read it, please go read it. It's not a real painful read. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I think you'll find it's not the typical document we produce. There is a lot of energy behind it, a lot of urgency expressed in it, a lot of the right things. It was not a recipe. It prescribes what the problem looks like and potentially a pointer to what the solution looks like. There's still a lot of work to go implement the details of how we get after it. There's 38 initiatives in there organized into 5 pillars. Many of those features are things we've tried before, but we're going to get after it in new ways. There's some other features we haven't tried before, so there's some new things in there that I think are going to be very impactful. The acquisition transformation is not an academic exercise. Like I said, it's not a theoretical one. It's an operational response to these realities that I just walked through. There's not another round of tinkering around the edges. It's a fundamental re-architecture of the system across those 3 parts of the system that I just talked about. Our efforts right now are building an acquisition system that are designed for today and focused on increasing the speed of delivery and reducing bureaucracy, empowering program managers and executives pursuing industry-driven solutions, applying agile acquisition processes, and digitizing acquisition. And I'll talk a little bit about what all that means. You're already seeing us increasing volumes through levers such as multi-year procurements, shared investment from industry and government, so shared risk. Deployed operators and experts that we're using, pulling the most seasoned folks in to go get after the hardest problems in these companies and these programs. And surging deal teams to negotiate better outcomes, so bringing in experts that have a lot of understanding of how to shape the right outcomes, the win-wins for industry and government. And we're increasing competition by expanding the industrial base, lowering those barriers of entry, reducing regulatory burdens, and strengthening adoption and acceptance of modern systems engineering and open architectures. We can't win with a system built for a different century. Earlier today, my pillar champion counterparts, Admiral Khatanazi and Ms. Method, spoke about rebuilding the defense industrial base and addressing the sustainment and life cycle management challenges. Given my background, I'm also going to stress that none of these programs succeed if we ignore sustainment imperatives, maintaining high levels of readiness, and our ability to operate in contested logistics environments. I'm going to go focus now on the three other pillars you didn't hear about yet. Those are elevating and empowering the acquisition workforce, maximizing acquisition flexibility and reducing regulatory burdens, and then developing high-performance systems through rigorous enterprise technical and execution excellence. A critical part of delivering on these pillars is the establishment of our first portfolio acquisition executives. I think you've heard a lot about that today. I'm going to give you a little bit of perspective from where I'm sitting on that. But these leaders are empowered to make decisions at the portfolio level, not program by program, but across entire mission areas. And I think where that really gets powerful is not just empowering them with those authorities, but having them look at the connection between things to deliver integrated capabilities. They break down stovepipes, they align resources to outcomes, and ensure we are designing, integrating, and delivering capability as a coherent warfighter portfolio. PAs give us the technical leadership, execution discipline, and decision speed required to keep pace with the threat. They're essential to elevating the workforce, maximizing flexibility, and driving enterprise-level technical excellence. To date, we've established 23 PAEs, realigning much of the acquisition workforce. We have several implementation approaches underway across the department, so there's not necessarily one way of doing this, and we're going to do the sets of reps to figure out what works and doesn't work as we implement it. We're going to institutionalize beyond that this idea of capability portfolio management at the enterprise level. So although within the services they'll have some ability to make trades within defined portfolios, at the enterprise level, the department level, we're going to use mission engineering to assess kill chains and kill webs in a mission context, understand where we have gaps and operational problems we need to solve, and then use that analytical basis to drive our acquisition decisions and ultimately our investment and divestments. So in other words, picking winners and losers based on what's actually important to the warfighter. Finally, we'll also pursue one of the key enablers of the acquisition transformation strategy, one that we don't talk about enough, and that is PBE reform. We had PBE Reform Commission actually did a whole report on this. There are features that apply to this very specifically. There are things that don't. Some of those things are weaved into our acquisition transformation strategy because, as I said earlier, we cannot make acquisition move faster unless we have a holistic approach that works on all aspects of the acquisition ecosystem. So I'm expecting we're going to see trades based on CPM analysis, whether that's shifts in threats or program execution or other realities that cause us to have to make trades and pivot with some fund transfer authority to move resources within prescribed portfolio definitions to the most pressing needs with agility, funding and acquisition agility, and requirements agility, while also providing the transparency to all the stakeholders along the way, most importantly, the Congress. This time, the bounded and transparent fund transfer authority is what I call portfolio PEs. So in other words, having well-defined portfolios, transparency in how we're moving things, and that will allow us to have that mechanism to make trades. That was one of the recommendations in the PBE Commission report that we never really picked up and ran with. Now's the time to pick up and run with it. That's how we're going to achieve balance across all the parts of the system. We're going to maximize acquisition flexibility through reduced regulations and processes, and that transformation begins with removing barriers that slow us down. As I noted, we have unprecedented alignment between the administration, the Congress, Department of War, and the Defense Industrial Base. We're taking advantage of that fact to achieve the most significant overhaul of the FAR and DFARS in its history. And it's revolutionary in two ways. First, we're taking the FAR and the DFARS back to its statutory roots. Although well-intentioned and containing lots of lessons learned, we have accumulated regulatory burdens that have created a death by 1,000 cuts that affect our workforce and industry. You combine that with a workforce that applies a compliance mindset, and we get a lot of drag. What we need is the right guidance and risk-based, tailored application of that guidance. So we are reducing the FAR and DFARS to only statutory requirements, removing compliance burdens and advancing substantive changes that will overhaul all parts of the DFARS and influence FAR changes. A total of 3,000 mandates spanning 500 pages have already been removed to date. Second, we will establish a system built for speed, value, and competition. FAR overhaul accelerates acquisition by shifting from compliance to delivery while enabling continuous communication with industry throughout the FAR overhaul process. It also prioritizes commercial solutions to reduce costs and strengthen competition by removing government-unique burdens and prescriptive compliance to discourage participation. This is more than regulatory cleanup or incremental reform. It's a foundational shift toward a faster, more responsive acquisition system that meets the demands of strategic competition. Along the way, we will pursue reforms to how we apply TINA to get cost and pricing insights, as well as smart transition from our CAS way of accounting to more of a GAAP approach for assessing accounting across industry. This is structural modernization, and it will be accompanied by AI-enabled tools to assist our workforce to write contracts quickly and appropriately apply the framework to their specific needs. Imagine what becomes possible when we remove that drag. A contracting officer who doesn't need to navigate 2,000-page regulation to buy a commercial software product, or a commercial satellite service acquired with a private sector speed and agility. This isn't about efficiency, it's about lethality. If we cut the contracting timelines as part of our overall streamlining of the acquisition process, we give our warfighters that much more of a head start. Speed becomes a weapon. Along the way, we're going to get after some of the things that have been plaguing us to get after high-performance systems, mostly about system engineering and MOSA implementation, software implementation. We've got to be able to field technologies and modernize systems at a rate that outpaces our adversaries. To do this, we're changing how we align, design, build, and deliver capability at the pace of the threat. So that's shorter decision cycles, incremental delivery of capability, empowered teams, risk management, not risk avoidance, and a culture that understands that sometimes you fail fast to learn fast. That is what wartime acquisition looks like. These areas are central to this shift. Software acquisition pathway, which we're making a lot of headway on. The modular open systems approach, which I want to talk about, what's different this time around, and then a more modern system engineering effort. The software acquisition pathway recognizes that software is a decisive element of combat power. The old model, treating software like hardware, locking requirements too early and waiting years for delivery, cannot survive in a world where adversaries push updates in weeks. The software pathway moves us towards continuous delivery, DevSecOps pipelines, automated testing, and warfighter in-the-loop development. Programs using this pathway are delivering capability 3 to 5 times faster than traditional approaches. Software is never done. It's continuous modernization, continuously assessing how to counter cyber threats and adapt to emerging mission needs. MOSA is the architecture of adaptability. We've been after this for a long time. I'm sure all of you have some experience with this, but we haven't really realized the benefits to date. Much of that is due to limited competitors in the market space, as well as teams that don't know exactly how to achieve the desired outcomes. We're changing that paradigm to ensure that we can effectively modernize and sustain our systems without major redesigns. Open interfaces allow new sensors, effectors, and algorithms to plug into legacy platforms. And we will create and foster competition at the subsystem and even module level to break vendor lock and drive innovation. Akin to the software cadre that's helping us get after the software pathway implementation, we're implementing a MOSA cadre to ensure best practices are applied and scaled across programs. We'll also ensure the program acquisition strategies contain the enabling features to maintain competition through an open systems architecture and government-controlled interfaces that allow competitors to continuously develop solutions and on-ramp in the future. And we have programs already moving out to realize this essential objective now. This is what will enable our warfighting systems to remain relevant, effective, and interoperable for our joint and coalition forces, allowing them to share data, coordinate fires, and operate as a single combat team. In conflict, the systems that dominate are the ones that can be reconfigured in hours, not years. Systems engineering becomes even more essential in this environment. The future fight's going to be defined by kill webs, not just bespoke kill chains, and by systems of systems, not single platforms. That requires a systems engineering discipline that understands mission engineering and assessing mission threads, system architectures, and force design, relevant kill chains and kill webs designed for interoperability from day one, integrating digital engineering and model-based approaches, managing technical risk continuously, and ensuring cybersecurity is baked in, not bolted on. There are many good examples across the department today, but we have to take this to the next level in how we apply these disciplines across programs. And at the enterprise level to enable CPM, capability portfolio management, and ensure our architectures and force designs will provide us with a decisive advantage. We are reasserting system engineering as a core competency, not a compliance function. Now I want to speak about the most powerful and critical element of this entire transformation. That's our people. The acquisition professionals in industry and government allow us to realize the outcomes we need. That transformation empowers the people doing the work. The contracting officers cutting timelines, the engineers managing risk, the logisticians sustaining readiness, and the program teams delivering capability. The decisive advantage in this decade will come from the people who can translate urgency into delivery, transitioning from a culture of compliance to one of speed and execution. The workforce must understand that they are empowered to lead this transformation, are as essential to deterrence as any aircraft, ship, or satellite, or any other system. They are the ones who turn strategy into capability. For too long, we have cultivated a culture of risk aversion. And I've seen this firsthand, so I'm going to relay a little story here. And I know how embracing that risk acceptance, risk managed culture can lead to big outcomes. In 2018, I was still with Navy. We were suffering from major readiness problems across the naval aviation fleet. We had hundreds of F-18 Super Hornets on the ground with extensive corrosion damage and missing parts, fatigue damage, other things. We had to take a hard look at how we would overhaul the whole system, not just for that program, all of naval aviation. And we broke down a lot of what was driving all those readiness challenges. And I had my team take a hard look at one specific thing and what was driving the timelines to turn aircraft out of the depot. And what we found was that timeline was being driven by in-service engineers holding the aircraft, waiting for the lifing analysis to be complete. These are well-intentioned people trying to do the right thing. They're trying to provide a known product back to the warfighter. I know exactly what life I'm going to get from the work we just did. I know it's safe. So that's what they're thinking. That's the right idea. However, it was not a risk-based decision. When I asked them why they weren't releasing the aircraft as soon as the work was completed, so the mod work, and do the analysis in parallel, they said they were concerned about the risk of that life limit being found after the aircraft was delivered back to the fleet. When I asked them how often we were seeing that happen in the data, they came back and told us 2%. So I said, the air boss said he wants to take acceptable risk. This is what acceptable risk looks like. He's going to take 2% all day long. Get the aircraft back. So we changed that whole process, and what that did was cut 4 months out of the cycle time of delivering these aircraft. So they got ready aircraft back to the fleet 4 months faster. That's what risk-based decision-making looks like, to use a very specific example, because sometimes it's hard when we talk about this conversation. What do we mean by that? That's what it means. And you heard Honorable Duffy talk about transferring risk from the operational realm to the acquisition realm. This is what we're talking about. I'd rather accept the risk of an 80% solution delivered to the warfighter in 1 year than wait for the 100% solution in 5 years. If anyone's worked an acquisition effort knows you're on an asymptotic approach. You never actually get there. You're just spending lots of time and money. This is where iterative and incremental delivery of capability comes from, that thinking. Of course, that means everyone, including our operational community, has to accept that idea of incremental delivery and not getting everything they expect in that initial version. And I just lived through this with Sentinel and the ICBM community, who were resistant to this idea because they had never actually experienced it before. In the aircraft world, we do this all the time. They didn't like that answer. You stuck me with this thing from the 60s. You're still making me operate and maintain it, and the new thing you're telling me is going to come in increments. They didn't like that answer, but that was the right answer to deliver capability faster. Everyone's got to get that cultural shift into their minds. That's how it's going to happen across the enterprise, everywhere from the factory floor to program offices to the field where the operators are. This is not an easy cultural shift. And some of the things we're doing to get after it include transforming the Defense Acquisition University into the Warfighting Acquisition University. That's just not a rebranding. We need to instill a new mindset. It's not just a test of how well people understand all of the regulations and process documents. We need to get experiential training to folks, the stuff they're maybe not getting in their day-to-day job, start testing them on that. Group exercises with actual use cases, and they're graded on how well they can pivot in those situations. That's the kind of curriculum that we're developing now so they can get some sets and reps dealing with hard problems and see how they handle those risk-based decisions. And we're telling our leaders that in the business of national security, the only unacceptable risk is inaction. Our efforts to pursue more deliberate development to bridge that gap between industry and government through structured industry-government rotations is another feature that I expect to get after, as we're looking at how to get more of a synergy between government and industry, get the workforce up on step. And I also want to bridge our understanding with operators and acquisition professionals using more deliberate rotations to the field so that the acquisition community can get a better understanding of what the business looks like from the operational view. The workforce is not part of a system. The workforce is the system. Let me say a little bit about rebuilding the arsenal of democracy and treating industry as a warfighting partner. Even in the best workforce cannot succeed without an industrial base that can increase production capacity and capability and deliver wartime surge capacity. As Honorable Khatnazi emphasized, rebuilding the modern arsenal of democracy is a strategic necessity. Strengthening the industrial base, treating industry as a true partner, and providing the stability needed to expand capacity are all priorities. It's a reminder that our ability to deter and respond depends on an ecosystem that can produce at scale, not on fragile single-point supply chains. I just want to reemphasize several points Honorable Khatnazi made. For too long, we've treated industry as a vendor. We must treat them as a warfighting partner. We look to industry to invest in industrial capacity and capability, and in return, we'll provide stable demand, predictable demand signals that will allow them to make sense out of those investments from a business standpoint. I also expect we're going to level the playing field a little bit here between traditional industry, defense industry, and newcomers in doing so. The message is clear. We expect industry to focus less on financial engineering and more on production engineering. We want to see the right behaviors out of industry, and you're seeing the administration signal that pretty strongly. Real performance, delivering capability on time and on budget will be rewarded. So this cultural shift is something we all must embrace. Everything I've described comes down to a new culture worthy of a great nation. It cannot live only within the Pentagon. It must extend across industry, academia, Congress, and the Department of War, especially into the field where program execution actually happens. A culture that values speed over perfection, initiative over caution, and understanding that inaction is decision, and often the wrong one. A culture aligned with Secretary Hegseth's message: America must be strong, fast, and unapologetically capable. Our people are the decisive advantage, not our platforms, not our budgets, our people. And they deserve a system that matches their talent, their urgency, and their commitment. We must move together. We give the warfighter what no adversary can match: the full power of the American nation. So let me close with this. The world is changing. The threat is real. The time for incrementalism is over. The acquisition transformation is our roadmap, but the real engine of change is the people in this room, and more specifically, the people in the PMOs, the warfare centers, the depots, and the factories. The Department of War is choosing to move forward aggressively, unapologetically, and with clarity that comes from knowing that American strength is the foundation of global security. We're done admiring the problem. Thank you for your commitment, for your partnership, and your willingness to build the arsenal that that secures America's future. Now let's get to work. With that, I'll take your questions.
Hello. Hi, sir. My name is Tyler Stroh-Snyder, and I'm a contract specialist at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. My question for you is, when we have all these changes going on through the FARs and the DFARs, and we're attempting to make these changes at the department level, what is your suggestion for me, who's someone who may be lower down the totem pole, who wants to help make these changes, but I have individuals who are above me who want to keep the business practices that we currently have?
It's a great question. See, that's the bold kind of behavior I want to see, like calling out his leadership. You should be challenging everything. And if you're not seeing it from where you're sitting, you should be taking it up the chain. It's interesting you bring this up because I've been talking to the SAEs and CAEs across, so the folks that I mostly interact with in acquisition, about getting people out of the trenches that are actually doing the work to start playing in the transformation strategy, because they're going to have to own it at the end of the day. I don't want a bunch of people in the Pentagon doing it. So you should be talking to your bosses about how you can get involved more explicitly on the things that you're interested in. There's lots of opportunities to do that. We need to do a better job also getting out in the field. I think you're going to see some of that. We have field training teams that DAU is doing. I think, or WAU, sorry, I'm still doing the sets and reps on that. WAU is already thinking about how to get more folks out into the field to explain how we're going to get after some of these things so we get the word out. But I think there's opportunities abound for you to play and others to play. That's an open invite to the room. You guys should be asking, how can I play more, and sending it up your chain. Thanks for that.
Sir, David Winks with AccuSite. If we look at the war in Ukraine and Russia and also in the Middle East, you're seeing infrastructure wars where refineries, oil depots, ammo depots are being taken out by relatively inexpensive drones. As we look at how we buy things, how are we valuing survivability and resilience, not just low price?
Yeah, that's a good question. We, for decades, have been very focused on those things, which is why we build exquisite, very expensive systems that work very well. We just can't do it in mass. So it's got to be a mix of those things. You need high and low end systems. For that particular mission set, I think what you're going to see is, and I didn't talk about it too much in my comments just now, but we're going to establish marketplaces that allow us to really get after this idea of driving, or having industry drive the solutions. So we're not prescribing specifically what it looks like with a lot of requirements that they got to meet with a spec and an RFP. We're going to say, here's an operational problem. We need to defend against these things. What can you do? And allow those companies to come in and propose solutions to our operational problems. And the things that look like they're going to be promising, we throw some money at that. We throw an OTA at that. So using CSOs to the maximum extent possible in a marketplace setting to pull in those solutions, that's what I think it's going to look like. It'll have to cover down on the right requirements and get it balanced between all those parameters: cost, schedule, performance.
Hi, Dawn Massa, Stankiewicz Massa Products Corporation. From our standpoint as a smallish size business, as a subject matter expert in the field, we hear all the right words coming out of folks like yourself, and it's very hopeful and exciting. But then when we see the PEOs switch to PAEs and some of the, the Arsenal of Freedom tour, I've actually quoted Hegseth in proposals I've written, because what I see at my point is that this change is being supported at the top, but filtered down, the folks that are given the responsibility to actually act on that change are still somewhat either confused or not sure where the barriers to actually take those risks are. And it's the categorization of that risk. Do you believe that the SMEs and industry that can really, because you only need clarity, capability and capital to scale. So you could have those advancements faster with the right team. Do you believe those subject matter experts in industry should be at the table with big primes and get the same type of focus and attention?
Yes, they should.
Great, then help me.
Yeah, the thing you're talking about, so there's some workforce challenges, right? We got to build back that talent set so we get folks that are thinking like this. So that's part of it. The PAs are being held accountable for those outcomes within their teams. I do expect we'll be deploying more talent into these program offices where it's required, and we're already doing that. Did anyone talk about bond today? So you guys got some sense of that. That's one aspect. There's other ways to do that. Frankly, I was doing bond before it was cool, because I would pull people in from industry or other parts of government to go do that. That's required. The PAs need to assess what they've got and be open to pulling those folks in so they can work with people like you in industry at a level of parity that gets to that outcome quickly. Does that make sense? Yep. Tony. Oh, sorry. Am I cut off? All right.